Miss Bacall, of course, is Lauren Bacall, who had a spectacular film career and was married to Humphrey Bogart.
And Jason Robards.
And Jason Robards. But just as this was your first Broadway musical, this was her first Broadway musical.
Yeah, it was.
What was it like working with Lauren Bacall?
It was a great pleasure. She was, because she'd never done this before, she was, of course, terribly nervous. But she had the goods. She didn't have a great singing voice by any means, but she had great star power and was very charismatic. And so it was a great pleasure to be with her. So great a pleasure that we ended up in bed together.
She wrote about you in her memoir, which is a very fine memoir. She talked about your character, what a fine character you have, and that she's someone that ever after she was always glad to encounter.
Thank you. High praise indeed.
The show is written by, of course, Strauss and Adams for the score, but Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who were close friends of Ms. Bacall, and the Comden and Green were practically the ultimate American sophisticates. What were they like to work with?
Oh, great.
Any memories of them?
A great pleasure. Adolph Green was a screamingly funny man, truly funny guy, and he could always crack a joke. He had a great sense of humor and a really sharp wit. And Betty Comden they were joined at the hip. They were, they finished one another's sentences. And they had a long, long career together. It was a great pleasure to be there.
While you were working on Broadway, though, you still were part of the Guthrie resident company. Is that right?
Yeah, I was an associate artistic director of the Guthrie when I did a little night music, and I was meant to go. I was meant to go back after that year to back to the Guthrie after I did the run of night music, and it lasted for a year. I was going back to play Macbeth. And Michael Langham was going to direct it, and then he changed his mind. And he said, I'm not going to do Macbeth, I'm going to do King Lear. And I had played Oedipus in a full body makeup. And I figured the only role they probably cast me as in Lear would be poor Tom, Edgar. And I said, I'm not playing Edgar because I'm not going to get all that makeup on my body all the time. And Michael said to me, no, you'll play Lear. And I said, what about Paul Valentine, who was the senior member of our company, or Robert Pastine, who was even more senior? He said, they'll thank me because it's such a bear of a role to do. I was 35. Time you start playing those character parts, he said.
You were a very young Lear, but you've done Lear since then, haven't you?
I did it again 10 years later in Canada at the theater in Edmonton, the Citadel Theater in Edmonton.
So all through your career, you've balanced classical roles, serious theater, serious plays, comedy, and musical theater.
Yeah.
With Sweeney Todd, you had a role that probably exercised all those muscles.
Exactly right. It did. I was in Winnipeg running the Manitoba Theatre Center, which I was a founding member of back in 1958 or 9. I had in my contract, the only way I could get out of the contract with the Manitoba Theatre Center was if I got a job offering on Broadway. And we were going to do a production of Company in our season, and I had called Mr. Prince and asked him if he wouldn't mind sending me his stage manager's copy of Company so I could use it as a reference. And he said, sure.
Were you going to direct Company, or were you going to...
No, I wasn't going to be in it or direct it. But I wanted to have it. Have the book there, so whoever did direct it could refer to it. And he said to me on the phone, oh, and by the way, Stephen is writing a musical for you. By the way. Yeah, it's called Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. It's a one-act thriller from England, and I'll send you the book. Hugh Wheeler has done the book, and it's really good. But there are no lyrics there yet either. So he sent me the thing, and I read it on my lunch hour as I was directing, I believe, Of Mice and Men at the time. And I got the thing, and I started to read it, and I thought, oh my God, they've lost their minds. And so I thought, no, I better not read this. I better wait and take it home with me so I can give it my undivided attention. And I did that and read it again and thought, well, you know, if the guy writes a really romantic score, it might work. But I thought it's really kind of bizarre. But anyway, they said you were going to do it, and so I left at the end of my first season in Winnipeg because we were going to go into rehearsal, and in the summertime. They're not going into rehearsal in the summertime. They were going in the fall of the next year. But I wanted to be out of the way of the person who was going to take over for me. So I said, bring him in and let him choose the season. And I'll just bow out as gracefully as I can. I got an offer to do a film in Calgary, Alberta in the summertime, or the late fall. And I was going to miss the first week of the Sweeney Todd rehearsal period, which is done for the principals only, without the whole company being there. And I was going to miss that week because of the stop date on the movie. So I said, do you think Steve would give me the music that he's got written so I could take it with me and I wouldn't be behind the 8 ball when I get back here? And Hal broached that to Stephen, and he agreed. And so I went to his home. I'd been there many times, actually, because he loves to throw parties. And I've been there 3 or 4 different times at parties. But I'd never been into the composing room. He took us in, and he sat down, and he was very nervous. And he said, excuse me for a minute, will you? And I thought, he's nervous. I'm supposed to be nervous. He came back, sat down at the piano, pulled out a joint, lit it, and offered it to me. Was I going to say no? We both had a couple of tokes. And he went, okay, that's better. Now, he said to me, do you know the Catholic Mass for the dead? I said, Stephen, Irish-French Catholic. Dies irae, dies ira. He said, exactly. And he played this on the piano. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And I said, I don't get that. He said, it's dies irae backwards. I said, you really are sick, aren't you? And then he went on and we played a couple of them. He gave me what looked like the New York phone book. And I went, Jesus, what is this? He says, it's the closing number of the first act. He said, it's called A Little Priest. And he started to play it for me. And I just laughed out loud. And he said, it gets better. So that was my introduction. And then it turns out that they postponed the start of rehearsals and for a couple of months. So I was able to go home to Winnipeg for Christmas that year. So that was a nice bonus.
Your co-star was, of course, Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
Had you known her before Sweeney Todd?
No. Well, we had met before. We'd been on stages like this at concerts and things, but we had never worked together before. But you know, she had the incredible reputation that she deserved, and so we met first day of rehearsal really strongly, and we hit it off famously, and we were very proud of the fact that we played it for a year, and we never went over the top to the other side, which you easily could have done with that piece. We played it very tightly to the vest and very seriously, because real seriousness is adamant for good comedy.
I don't want to leave Sweeney Todd, but I do want to observe that later in your careers, you and Ms. Lansbury played together in Murder, She Wrote, where you were an Irish MI5 agent
Exactly.
who lured Jessica Fletcher into international intrigue.
Yes. And there was a little bit of a spark there. We never ever had a romance, but we obviously were pretty attracted to each other. Michael Haggerty was my character's name. And I did 9 different episodes over the years, one a year for about 9 years, as Michael Haggerty. So it was fun. It was a nice thing. It's a nice memory to have. And I spoke to Angela on the anniversary of 40 years the other day, and I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm doing pretty good. She said, but I'm 93. Isn't that silly? And I said, yeah, well, I'm aiming for that too myself.
When you first heard the score of Sweeney Todd, what were your thoughts? And did you imagine that this would be a work that would go on to have a life in opera houses as well as theaters?
Well, I didn't think the opera world would maybe grab at it, but I thought, you know, there's some great songs in here. I mean, The Epiphany, for God's sake, is one of them. You know, it's an extraordinary piece of writing. But I thought when we started to do it, and we had the book, and Stephen had written all of the music, and we were doing run-throughs. Now let me even go back to the first week. The end of the first week, I think the first time I did The Epiphany, and we blocked it out, Harold and I. And Mrs. Prince, Judy Prince, came to see the rehearsal, and I sang The Epiphany, and she said to me after, she said, "Len, that just won you a Tony Award." I said, "Oh, come on." She said, "No." She said, "Nobody's ever seen anything like that on a Broadway stage before." And she was right.
That original production featured a pretty extraordinary scenic design by Eugene Lee.
Yes.
Which was constructed in part from a dismantled factory, the works of a factory.
An ironwork.
Ironworks. Could you tell us a little about navigating that? And I believe you had a problem at the outset of the run because of your entrance, because of the circumstances of your entrance. Isn't that right?
Well, the extraordinary thing was this, it was an ironworks that had a railing that could go up or down and back and forth on the stage, like a foundry, like you'd find it in a metal foundry. And one day, Angela and I were coming out we discovered that Toby, our little friend Toby, had realized what we were doing. And so I said, well, then we're going to have to eliminate him. So we go looking for him, and we came up through a trap door in the stage and walked downstage singing a song with just follow spots on each of us. And the lyric was, Toby, where are you? Nothing's gonna harm you, not while I'm around. Toby. I'm looking for him. And as I come out, I hear a rattling sound. And I happen to look up out of the corner of my eye, and the bridge was starting to descend. And Angela was over there, and I was over here, and I came over and grabbed Angela and took her downstage. And the thing landed behind us on the deck with rattling chains as it came down. So we had to stop the show. The house lights came up, and they had to pull out the back thing at the back, and the high stage hands had to come out and drag this thing off, and then put it back in, and we begin again. So I said to the stage manager, what are we going to do? He said, well, I guess we better do it again. So I came out and I said, take two. And we did it all over again. And then went on. And I think everybody that I ever knew was at that performance.
Originally, your first entrance was from below stage, right?
On that trap. It was an elevator.
And wasn't there, didn't you have some breathing problems as a result of...
At the beginning, some of the cast were up there digging a grave. And the elevator would go down and down, so that to note that they were in fact digging some soil. So they used potting soil at the time, and so when I was coming up in the elevator on my initial entrance, it would cause a draft, and I was inhaling this stuff, and I got laryngitis from it. And so I went to the voice doctor, Dr. Wilbur James Gould at the time, who was a very famous ENG guy here in New York. And he said, he took a sample and said, your throat is very red, and I don't think you should sing anymore. I think you should rest your voice. And I said, well, I'm sorry, doctor, but as long as I'm alive, no one is singing this role. Yeah. If I can sing it. And I'm able to sing it. I said, but I just don't have a head voice anymore. And he called. I went in to see him the next day, and he said, "You have acute laryngitis, according to this." And I said, "Well, I can sing. I just can't make a head tone." And he said, "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it then." He said, "Because obviously you're not going to listen to me." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not."
That was the week that you did the cast recording?
And we did the cast recording. So the cast recording that you hear, the original one, I have acute laryngitis, according to the doctor.
How long did you do the show, for a year or for longer?
Yeah, a year. The run was for a year, so it was a little bit longer than that with the previews and stuff. But yeah, it was a year.
Tell us a little bit about your film career, because you've had a august film career. You were in a memorable film that Alan Alda directed called The Four Seasons.
Four Seasons, yeah.
With an extraordinary cast. You were married in the story to Sandy Dennis.
Right. And then we were getting a divorce. And Carol Burnett was in it, Rita Moreno was in it, Jack Weston was in it. And we had a really good time. Alan and Alan, of course. And Bess Armstrong, who was my girlfriend. And that we shot it in the Virgin Islands. But you really shouldn't go to the Virgin Islands to make a movie. You should go there to make love, maybe. But not to make a movie, because it's a pretty slow-moving place. And you know, a movie crew is a big bunch of folk. And we were on St. John's, and unfortunately we got robbed, all of us, by the natives, because when we would be out filming, people would go into the rooms and take stuff. But we had a really good time doing it. And then we shot a bit in Atlanta. We shot here in New York. The day after, I sang the last Sweeney Todd on Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, we were shooting the Four Seasons in the Village. So I had no postpartum from Sweeney Todd.
And that was, The Four Seasons was one of the top 10 grossing movies of that year.
Yeah.
1981. You've played a number of historical characters. For HBO, you were FDR.
Yeah.
And off-Broadway, you were Ernest Hemingway in Papa.
Right.
And Stalin in Masterclass, I believe, for The Roundabout.
Right. And Teddy and Alice is Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy and Alice, yes. Broadway musical.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been very, very fortunate in my career. And I've worked with some of the best directors of the last half century. So, you know, if you're that lucky, you end up being interviewed up here.
And besides Sondheim and Strauss and Adams, you worked with Alan J. Lerner in Dance a Little Closer.
Yeah. Or as it opened and closed after one performance. So we called it Dance a Little Closer or Close a Little Faster.
We should also note that more recently you played Bernard Law in the Best Picture of 2017, Spotlight.
Yeah, that was fun. Because the biggest fun about it was that on the New York Times, the review was a picture of myself and Liv Schreiber and the title of the review was "All the Cardinal's Men."
I need a prompt because there was supposed to be a countdown clock, and I haven't been able to locate it. How much more time do we have, stage manager?
It's 6:12 right now.
Okay, so we have 3 more minutes. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to reminisce about as we wind up?
No, I can't think of anything. The reason that we're stopping this soon is because I've got to do another show tonight at stage 2 at the City Center, and I have a 7:30 curtain. So when you get to this time in your life, naps are very important. So I'm going to go have a nap.
That's actually something that your character Harry Townsend talked about, was naps.
Yep. Naps.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
And Harry Townsend continues through April 5th.